they get involved in different committees that we have and projects that we work on. We have a young girl from the middle school, Abby, and Abby, she's into recycling, and we have a recycling bin there next to the trash can, and you better not let her catch you putting anything in either one that doesn't belong there. She's worse than the FBI, so they get involved in things like that, and different things that we do, events that we do, they participate in. So, and they mostly work with the kids, so we're getting the kids involved in this because this is their city too, and they need to be able to take some pride in it and do that. So this afternoon we had a Keep Woodland Park Beautiful barbecue appreciation for the Teen Center for all that they do to help us. So
that's awesome. Thank you very much. Sophie Webb, a little something for you. Well, I know that Woodland would like to put in this picture, but on behalf of the City of Woodland Park, the Council, we'd like to give you this mayor's pin, which is in appreciation of your service to the city and kind of going over and above, which we really appreciate, especially at a young age. So look forward to having you do more things as you grow older, and we really appreciate your time. So thank you very much. Okay. Absolutely.
okay, David, the rest of you, come on up here.
This will be the Keep Woodland Park Beautiful segment of the agenda tonight. So, David, you're on.
All right. David Perkins, 148 Illini Drive, representing Keep Woodland Park Beautiful. I'm joined here by a cadre of compadres, Dan Sloan, Jeff Wheeler, Linda Garrett, Sophie Fox, who you just met, and Jan Wilson. Quickly, wanted to let you know that of our 4 projects, the first one's done, which we talked about, the baggage building at Bergstrom Park, and the other 3 projects are moving right along. You'll certainly see a lot of work done here starting in the next week or 2, and then they should be finished by the end of the month. Also, what I wanted to do, as you know, the original grant was for $20,000, and we received a $16,000 check to kickstart the program. And then, due to some technical glitches, we received another $4,000 check, which completes the $20,000. I failed to utilize the receipt of the $16,000 check for a PR opportunity. So now, at this point in time, I'd like to take the opportunity to present you, the mayor, the $4,000 check to, we'll pretend it's the $20,000 check in total. But we'll use this as the PR opportunity. So, Mr. Mayor, if you will.
stipend from the authority. This year it's about $150,000 to augment our dispatch personnel. There's 8 dispatchers that will augment from this board. So what I'm requesting is to approve this restated IGA. It's been approved previously. There's no substantive changes. It is still open to public comment until the 10th of November. So what I would request is to approve it subject to any non-substantive changes that may come forth. If there is anything that is substantive, we would bring that back before the board.
Thank you. Council, any questions? This is all funded by?
The El Paso 911 board receives their funding through the surcharge on your telephone bill.
Well, good for us. Thank you very, very much.
Yes, sir.
Anything? If not, we'll call for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Motion to approve. Yes.
Second. Thank you. down to the budget and the review of the DDA Fund 215. And David Butler, you go.
Thanks, Mayor. We're going to continue with our discussions on the 2017 budget this evening. Mike will lead us through the majority of that process to discuss the DDA funds and also the enterprise funds. He'll have some discussion with you on the supplemental appropriation for 2016. And just as a reminder, Council, we can visit tonight on any of the budget items that you like. Know that we have at least two more meetings associated with the budget, or as many as you deem necessary to complete this process. So with that, Mike, why don't you get us started?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So tonight is the second regular meeting, and then we also had the work session last week. So this is the third time we've talked about the budget. It's still in the October 12th draft version. We are still continuing to update that version, but for purposes of tonight, we're still on the October 12th budget draft. The updated proposed draft budget is scheduled to be presented on November 17th on first reading. And at that point, that's where changes to comparing this draft to the draft you'll be seeing on the 17th. We'll show those changes or talk about those changes. So tonight, we are going to start with the DDA. Tanner Coy from the DDA is here to speak about their budget. That starts on page 37. And then after that, we'll go on to the utility funds, funds 510 and 520 for the water and wastewater utility services. And then after that, the 2016 supplemental appropriation. Tanner?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and everybody. It's great to be here with you again. This is my rookie.
Tanner, just give us the name and address. Thank you.
Tanner Coy, 550 Allegheny Drive, Colorado Springs. This is my rookie year as treasurer and my first at-bat with a budget presentation, so bear with me. I'm swinging for less than 10 minutes here. You have the draft budget in front of you? Okay, we start on page 37. And it is the Woodland Park Downtown Development Authority Fund. That is the 215 fund. And on page 37, the fund balance summary is shown. Shows projected 2016 year-end balance of $120,304. Currently projecting 2017 revenues exceeding expenses by $17,500, which leaves an ending fund balance in 2017 of $137,804. Turning to page 38 is the itemized budget, and at the top over on the right-hand column underneath the beginning fund balance, you will see projected revenues of $564,800. This number is calculated rather simply. The information is all provided by the county assessor. It's very easy to put together, though it is subject to change for a variety of reasons. For instance, Betty Clarkline tells me to be very cautious of commercial properties changing use to residential, which reduces the tax revenue by 2/3. And she's mentioned 4 properties downtown that have done so in the recent past. Should the residential trend in Woodland Park continue, this number may decline as a result. DDA's legal counsel has also warned us 3 times of changing legislation in 2017 that might also adversely affect that number. Moving on, below that, in the center of the far right column, you'll see a big red waving flag, although it's probably not red, it's just blank. That is no payroll expense budgeted for 2017. This means your volunteer board has elected to save 60,000 taxpayer dollars by adding their own sweat equity to the DDA. This is not a long-term plan. It is being implemented in the near term as a valuable step to improve the financial condition of the DDA. Remember, payroll is the single largest controllable cost in that budget. As a quick aside, I do realize now that I have made a big mistake by presenting budgets with no payroll expenses. That mistake has allowed some to misinterpret the DDA's true financial capabilities. Going forward, I will likely present budgets with payroll expense in future years, and the payroll figures will be based on historical data. That should help everyone to understand that volunteer sweat equity cannot be leveraged. Below that, under operating expenses, you'll see office supplies of $500. This past Tuesday, the DDA board directed me to essentially go paperless in order to save printing costs. Our board packets are sent out electronically. I will only print items other than the agenda upon request. Beautification, $10,000. This is just enough money to pressure wash storefronts and sidewalks that face Highway 24 between Cafe Leo and Tweeds one single time. Property owners used to do this on their own, but water quality regulations have made the process of cleaning our storefronts very expensive. What used to cost less than $2,000 now costs $10,000. It may seem like an easy thing to work around or to give up, but it wasn't very long ago. A former city public works director told me he would report me if he saw me clean my building with anything other than rain. He is right to enforce water quality regulations, and that challenge created by them must be met, and the DDA is planning to assist with it. Earlier this year, the city partnered with the DDA to split this cost, and we hope the city will be able to do so again. But in the event it does not, this $10,000 budget will ensure one single minimal cleaning of one tiny portion of the district. An email I sent you earlier today does include images that will help to understand. Pictures worth 1,000 words. Moving on, telephones, $0. Subscriptions and dues, $0. Advertising, publications, other, $2,500. This allows the DDA to re-implement the newsletter program and or publish important items in the newspaper if necessary. Contract, professional services, and attorney fees, $15,000. There's a good chance this is underestimated. Internet connection and service, $0. Travel and training, $500. This is for board retreat or large meetings held at locations like the golf course. We had one of these meetings in 2016 that cost the DDA $200. County treasurer fees, $16,900. This is 3% of revenues issued by the county. It's an automatic number based on the revenues. We have no control over it whatsoever. County abatements of $20,000. 2 years ago, large unexpected abatements cost the DDA tremendously in terms of revenue and caused additional funds to be lent to the DDA by the city. Since that time, city staff has included a $20,000 expense in the DDA's budget to cover this. I've chosen to leave this budget item untouched as I do not intend to be back here asking the city for money. TIF reimbursement agreements, $116,800. These are contractual payments subordinate to bond debt and are somewhat predictable. This number increases or decreases with the actual tax payments made by the recipient properties. So this leaves a total operating expenditures in the budget of $182,200. And turning to page 39, again on the far right column, starting at the top, I've budgeted $20,000 for Woodland Station improvements. This is to ensure that the DDA can take advantage of the grant funds available for grading at Woodland Station. Without this budget, we risk beginning a project that would be left incomplete and dysfunctional. Not a good option. Below that, debt service, $345,300. This includes a $65,000 payment to the city, which is $30,000 more dollars than previously budgeted by city staff. The number also includes $280,300 in existing bond service payments. Servicing debt is, by far, the largest expense of the DDA, totaling nearly double all other expenses combined. We are severely over-leveraged. This leaves total expenditures at $547,500 and an ending fund balance of $137,804. Since inheriting financial management for the DDA in July of this year, we have absorbed a major $48,000 reduction in planned revenues while increasing planned city payments by $30,000 above what city staff had for years been planning. We have also added beautification and Woodland Station budgets totaling $30,000, which is effectively splitting 50-50 the $60,000 payroll expense savings that the board is earning. So do you follow? That's an increase in city payment of $30,000 and an increase in downtown investment of $30,000. Which represents an overall improvement in efficiency of the DDA by 108,000 taxpayer dollars in 2017 alone. That's volunteer sweat equity in your local government. There is some risk that changing legislation in 2017 will adversely affect the DDA revenues, and I don't yet know how great the effect will be or how likely it is to happen. I do know that Mr. Benedetti has warned us repeatedly about it, and his language seems very specific regarding increasing base at the expense of the TIF, and an adverse effect on the ability to service existing debt. He said our revenues may be overstated, and he urged us to budget conservatively. The budget before you is as accurate, responsible, and well thought out as I think you've probably seen from the DDA, and it puts, for the first time in many years, the DDA on a positive financial trajectory, planning positive net revenues and a growing fund balance while accelerating debt service payments to the city. Do you have any questions?
First question. Tanner, I don't understand the TIF reimbursement agreement, just the surface. Could you explain what that is?
Certainly. There are several types of TIF reimbursement agreements in place right now, but essentially what you see in a TIF reimbursement agreement is a commitment by the DDA to refund a portion of the tax increment generated by new development or improvement of property back to the person or entity that is investing in it or the property itself. So, for instance, with Trail Ridge Apartments, proposal would be, DDA, we'd like to invest in your community $12 million to build residential development. The resulting tax increment might be, and forgive me, I don't have a cheat
Sure.
sheet here, just to make up a number, $100,000 per year. But to bring this project to fruition, because of development costs and other things, the numbers aren't quite where they need to be, and we really need some assistance to the tune of $75,000 a year for the next 5 years, and a reduced amount after that, and a reduced amount after that. That's the nature of a TIF reimbursement agreement.
Are all of the businesses within the authority receiving a similar reimbursement, or are each one of them approached differently?
You asked about all the properties within the district?
Mm-hmm.
No, not at all. In fact, the vast majority have no kind of TIF agreement whatsoever. The only properties that do are listed in the spreadsheet that I've been providing, and you can see the magnitude of the reimbursement to each of those properties. When the DDA formed, the sum of all of the assessed values of every property within the district became what's referred to as the base. That's a magnitude of, just say $5 million, to pick a number. Every year after that, the base is adjusted by the assessor's office based on formulas that I have yet to understand. But it's minor adjustment based on, I believe, regional trends in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Any assessed value total within the district, a sum, basically repeating that same process in a following year that results in a number greater than the base. The difference between that and the base is the TIF. That is the incremental value. And multiplied by the applicable mills, you will get the revenues of the DDA. That's how the revenues are calculated.
Revenues, I understood. It was the TIF reimbursement to select, partners in the district. Not all of them will be indefinite reimbursement periods. I'm assuming that each agreement is different. Some may be receiving this reimbursement for 5 years. Others may be receiving it for less or more, correct?
Yeah. Without looking at them all, I think 15 years is a pretty consistent term for a TIF reimbursement agreement with our DDA. Several of them are 75% reimbursement for 5 years, 50% for 5 years, and 25% for 5 years. And then they expire, and the full TIF is paid into the DDA.
When will Trail Ridge expire?
Trail Ridge's first reimbursement year is next year, and I think it is a 15-year agreement.
15 year. Okay. Thank you.
TIF part, the incremental, they pay their property tax. They get 75% of their property tax back. The DDA gets the 25%. And then based on how many years, it goes down to 50%, then the DDA gets 50%, and that's how we get our revenue. And that's not all TIF agreements are that way, but that's a standard one. It's that simple.
And if I might, because it may be applicable in the not-too-distant future, another method of using TIF that our DDA has done is with the hardware store, for example, for site improvements. They didn't ask for a reimbursement on their TIF when they built at Woodland Station. They asked for improvements, public improvements, and assistance in paying. So the DDA funded up front some major improvements using the TIF that was generated by the project to leverage, to go to the bank and issue bonds and fund a project that helped the development come to fruition and uses the TIF to repay the debt.
Is that the only project that we've done that with, the hardware store?
No, the O'Reilly's and Family Dollar stores had a similar arrangement with the DDA on a smaller scale. At the time, that drainage issue was being referred to as the hole, if I remember correctly, and the
Yes.
DDA put some funds into fixing that, so the site was more easily developed, and those projects would come in. And there's another potential project pending, actually right now, that's just come to the DDA board as of this last Tuesday that may be along these same lines.
When the DDA coordinated with a lender on the possibility of an entire repayment to the city, do you recall what your, if in fact you were to secure a bond for $1 million, what the annual repayment for that bond would have been if you decided to go with that?
The annual debt service payments are not consistent throughout the term of that loan. The first year payment is $120,500 something by my calculations. I think Mike has done similar calculations. We're off by a couple $100, so it's about $120,000 first year. For some years that escalates and then it begins to decline.
Mike, do you have those numbers? Could you?
These are mine. Yeah, okay. First year, $120,156. Second year being 2018, $129,987, and $125,962. 2020 is $121,937, and so on.
Did you explore the possibility of a smaller amount? In other words, instead of asking for $1 million, say $500,000.
I did not explore that with the banker, but I have toyed with those numbers myself, and it's fairly proportional without knowing what the fees are and how those fluctuate. It's, I don't have a solid number for you on that, but it's pretty proportional reduction in debt service.
Has this been an option that's been discussed by the rest of the board? A smaller amount with repayment beginning in 2018 for the remainder of the $1 million?
Not specifically. The board is aware that there are various options, that being one of them, and has not really discussed a partial bond issue. It's been looked at as consistent with the paperwork that we've shared. So the city has given us, the DDA, in writing, a willingness to reduce the loan by $184,000 in interest, essentially, if the full $1 million were repaid within the next year, if I recall. And so that has been the effort, is to find a way to make that happen. And
for the next 3 years, to the city if we accept what you're basically proposing? 65,000 the first year,
Yes.
65,000 the second year?
Bear with me.
I don't have it in front of me, I'm sorry.
Yep,
I do, it's
getting
right
to
here.
it.
Thanks, Noel.
You know what, if you wanted, I did bring hard copies of
It's
that.
75.
65 cent in the third year?
75, and then 110, 110, 115, 120,
So-
130, 150, 150.
Just a thought, and to keep with your analogy, we'll try to stay in the ballpark here. If you refinance for half, just a suggestion, clearly the city would like to get repaid as much as they can, as quickly as they can. But I don't think anyone wants to put the DDA in dire straits. If you're paying 65,000 now, and 75,000 the next couple of years, and your debt, the debt payment would be about $130,000 with the $1 million loan, right? Take half of that, and that's about the number that you're paying now. What would be the downside of getting that $500,000 loan and getting that chunk out of the way now?
Well, if we maintain some version of the agreement that's in place right now, there are several downsides. Primarily, though, it's the cost of issuing those bonds and sending that cash flow outside of this community for the benefit of increasing spendable cash on hand. And if the spendable cash on hand is not needed, then a reduction in the general fund balance should not be incurred. It's just not a good financial decision. So it could be done, but it's at expense, which is, unless it's necessary, is not responsible.
So, on both of your line of thinking, are you thinking that to do a $500,000 loan to get the cash, and then have the DDA pay the other $500,000 over time, zero interest? That's your idea at the moment.
Kind of seems like it balances out a little bit. You get, little give and take there.
Right. That's the concern that the DDA has is that we have no salaries, benefits, insurance, and eventually we're going to need that. And so that's why our end fund of $137,000 looks so generous. But if I took $55,000 from that, if I say we were paying people, we would only be down to $82,000. It would be impossible for us to, I'm speaking as a DDA, it would be impossible for us to pay a loan, because then we would add, because the loan is 120 the first year, or 130.
No,
That would-
that would be if it were for the million. That's why I asked the question, if
So
it was
would
reduced to half a
the
million.
city be willing to not double payment? Just get the 500 and then hold off for a few years for the rest of the payment?
Well, I don't know what the city would do, but it's certainly something to consider. If your payment is about the same, I know what you're saying, it's gonna cost you more, but on the back end, you're gonna save interest with the second $500,000 that you owe the city.
It costs all the taxpayers more. And it's a reduction in the general fund balance, which appears to me to already be very low. And I'm not sure why you would opt for that unless the cash is necessary. And in all of my discussions with the city manager, city staff, and city finance director, I am given nothing but confidence in the city's financials, and told when I ask that there is no concern that the city will be in any jeopardy of reducing any services or paying on any of its bills, which tells me cash is not an issue. And if it is not an issue, to reduce the general fund balance and expense taxpayer dollars unnecessarily does not sound like a good idea, or like there's really any reason to do it. Furthermore, when working with the city, the DDA and the city have much more flexibility should times change. Our budget is tight without payroll. It's healthy and growing. It's on the right. It's on a healthy trajectory, I should say. But it isn't a strong organization yet. And should our attorney be right and changing legislation reduces our revenues? Should Betty Clarkwine be right and abatements are coming through? In fact, another one, just as of yesterday, she told me there's another abatement that wasn't on the radar, $13,500 from 2015, which means the 2016 financials, not even next year's budget, this year's, will be affected adversely by up to $13,500. And that same property will have a reduction in revenues from what's been projected going forward by $13,500. So those things represent risk to the numbers that are here. And if they happen, and for some reason the DDA does not have sufficient revenue to pay its debt service, then owing that money to the city provides more flexibility. It's lower risk for the citizens and businesses and taxpayers of Woodland Park than if that money is owed to Vector Bank, because Vector will take the money right out of the revenues at the top, regardless of anything below that. So changing circumstances in the future present risk, and there's no reason to increase that if it's not necessary.
Go ahead, Paul, I'm sorry.
Tana, you're right. You're right in your position, and I would like to look at this another way. Move ahead with the Woodland Station and using it as an event center and developing programs inside the event center brings tourism into Woodland Park. Tourism brings money that is being spent in the local businesses. Taxation increases. As taxation increases, the money's going into the city coffers increase without increasing the debt to the citizens of Woodland Park by going into a bond issue, which up front you have to pay the majority of the funds just to get the bonds. I see no reason why we should go into debt to raise money to put in the city coffers, and it drops their budget down because they're willing to forgive so much money, when we can look at it in a different way by bringing tax monies into the city through events. I understand that you have the committee has a very aggressive event program coming up. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, there's been a lot of work on that, and a lot of planning to be of benefit to the properties within the district, which is the stated purpose of the DDA and its bylaws. And the DDA board is very, very serious about helping the local economy to grow.
And should we suffer any financial bankruptcies in this city on commercial properties, we got a problem. Especially if you borrowed money from Vector. Because you're right, they are going to take it right off of the top. I'm all for a payment program.
Well, I am too. I just want more of it. That's the bottom line. And I was pleased that most of the DDA members were at our work session last week when we asked the city manager to lay out where the costs had incurred with the pool and with Memorial Park, and that those are short-term costs that we will be able to overcome in at least another fiscal year or another calendar year. But when you talk about risk, the city is at risk. We have options with the entire budget, but primarily with the general fund, where we will not be able to maintain the reserve this council had decided was important to have almost 4 years ago. I'm not asking the DDA to cover that difference. I'm saying that having that cash for emergencies, and in this case, God has the final vote. We don't know if we're going to have another fire or another flood or whatever it may be. We have a reserve with our Tabor Reserve required by law, but if even with the surgical cuts that we're going to discuss as a council with the 2017 budget, we will not be able to make that 10% reserve this year. So I'm suggesting that if you take a smaller bond, that even with the upfront costs of securing that bond, ultimately it's still going to be the same monthly. In fact, it might even be less monthly or annual payments from the DDA to the city. Just for consideration, you've pointed this out very well. Vectra has the lien on the property. The city does not. Our leverage is really the goodwill that we need to maintain between the two entities. But I would ask that you consider a smaller amount in a debt service in order to pay us a larger amount than $65,000 a year.
I'm happy to bring that back to the board and ask for their direction on it and proceed accordingly. For clarification with that, if we were to proceed with a $500,000 bond issue, the debt service is now going to Vectra. How do you propose repaying the additional $500,000 to the city?
You would begin payment after 2017 in the same manner that you would have before. It would just be a smaller amount. That's my suggestion. I don't know what the rest of the council would agree to, but that would be my suggestion.
I'm not sure I completely follow you. If we proceed as you just described, the DDA has paid the city $500,000 and is now making $65,000-ish payments to Vectra Bank. How do we handle the remaining $500,000 that is owed to the city by the DDA and get those debt service payments?
We would have to examine a new payment plan, obviously.
And you clearly have an increasing revenue stream as we move forward, am I correct?
No, that's what's projected, but that is at risk. It is not clear. The lawyers warned us 3 times about changing legislation that could have a substantial effect. The county assessor is telling me, not good news coming. And
I misspoke. Clearly you projected an increasing revenue stream. Well, I'm just going by your numbers, that's all.
no, if all goes according to plan, then we're in great shape there. But that's not been the track record. I know you probably haven't had a chance to review the emails I sent you today, but the county assessor sent me a spreadsheet on abatements from 2013 through 2016 over a 4-year period. Just within the DDA, there have been $144,000 worth of abatements. It's $36,000 a year. That's not, we're budgeting 20. And I saw a proposal yesterday that said strike that from the budget. The DDA is 15 years through a 30-year life and is $5.8 million upside down. It's time to reverse the trend. That's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to project a healthy financial trajectory and not a continual decline that may be controlled, may be mitigating some risk, but it's still a decline. And that's on the backs of volunteers who are working to save all the money they can from the budget. We'll either turn this thing around or it will just continue in decline forever. And it's time to turn it around.
Go ahead, Bill.
No, you were.
No, go right ahead.
Council, Mr. Mayor, Council, whatever, sorry. We've been presented this. I was at the DDA meeting the other day, so I've seen this loan repayment. It was a unanimous decision by the DDA board to go forward with this. They've asked us to consider this. I would like to put this on the official action portion of the next council meeting on the 17th, I believe, for further discussion, further analysis, and things like that. With the concurrence of the council, we could put it on the 17th for, instead of it in the DDA report section, in the 5 section, new business, wherever it's appropriate for action.
Sounds good to me. If that's good with council. No?
Yeah. I agree. So I'm deep in the trenches with this issue, and everyone knows that. As a councilman, my concern is that we knew that we were going to have a low reserve. We knew we were going to have a low unrestricted funds. But right now, I feel like we're asking the DDA to bail us out for our bad decisions, knowing where we were.
Bad decisions? Be
Well,
careful.
We were informed that we were going to be okay. And so here we are, I almost feel like we're begging the DDA for money.
No, when was this originally due? How many
Doesn't
times have-
matter when it was due.
I mean,
The
well-
fact is, we're really pushing
I'm not
them to
pushing.
give us $1 million when they have this payment plan is unbelievable. 10 years, and it can be adjusted. It can go up, it can go down. This money right here could actually pay for the operating costs of the pool
No,
every year.
I'm not pressuring. I'm asking to consider other alternatives.
And they're telling
That's it.
us that it's not a wise decision, because based on stuff going on, that the funding will be to a point where the DDA can't function. They can't hire anybody. They're going to be just doing nothing for the next 3 or 4 years. And is that putting them in that situation, is that their fault or our fault?
It's certainly not our fault. I don't think it's.
Well,
their
we're the
fault.
ones building a pool. We're the ones building a fleet maintenance. We're the ones doing all this. So why are we saying, hey, give us your money now? I've read the resolution. It says that the money's owed, but why don't we just create another resolution for a payment plan?
And we can do
We
that.
could.
I'm just
Okay.
offering to investigate every option that we have. That's it.
To me, I'm sitting here going, to me, this is a great payment plan. In 10 years, it's paid off. 10 years. A loan is going to be 15 years, and all that interest is now going to be paid. We might as well take all the money that's an interest and just put it in a pile and burn it. With this payment plan, it's coming back to the city, and we're not wasting taxpayers' money with interest on a loan.
Good point. That's a good point.
So I think as council, we need to get our own affairs in order and not pressure the DDA for their money when they obviously don't have it.
This is a nice plan that adds some interest and some good faith payments down the line, which we were kind of thinking, yeah, we might not get. But once again, I would like some more investigation. They've asked us for an action, yes or no, accept or reject on this. We should consider this as it is on the 17th with all kinds of discussion, and then
But-
they will have more time to investigate some of
But
these questions.
actually, it's embedded in our budget. We don't have to make an act or take an action tonight or at
No,
the
I
next
mean,
meeting.
well, they want, the time is of the essence for them. It's on January, they gotta do something, right?
Well, and
The
we'll,
budget
mean,
will
that's
be
what it
approved.
says
Yeah,
here.
budget will be approved by
we'll do
January.
what you said and reconsider on the 17th.
Yeah,
That's fine.
as an action, because right now, we can discuss it all we want, which is fine, we should,
We wanna
but
approve the
we
budget
can
for
discuss it more
formal.
next time, and they might have better information for us, too.
Mayor, I am not dismissing your ideas. That is a great idea to pay $500,000. But now you're asking them to pay still the full amount. A possibility would be have them do the loan when that loan's over, or when the DDA is healthy in 5 years or 10 years, maybe start paying back the city.
That's an option, too.
That's an option too, but asking them to pay the $500,000 and the $65,000 and the payment plan.
No, that
Okay,
was not my
that's what it felt
suggestion. No.
Or that's what I heard, I'm sorry.
No, my suggestion was that, excuse me? My suggestion was that they take a smaller loan out, pay us up front now, in a year where our cash reserve is lowered. Whether you want to call it bad decisions that were made, I would not characterize what's happening in 2017 as bad decisions, but it is a reality. we're going to have to make some very strategic cuts if we do in fact want to maintain a 10% reserve. And I don't think we'll ever make that if we make several cuts in the very conservative budget the staff has presented. I'm saying a smaller loan amount, not the entire million, and then at some point in time start a second repayment plan for the rest of the million.
I think that's a great idea. I think it needs to be looked at because I do see that will. I just don't see a loan and a city payment at the same time.
No,
I see a loan and then
that's
eventual
not what I
payment.
suggested.
My concern is that we need to, as a council, get our house in order. We're concerned about the budget and the reserve, but yet we are spending money. We're hiring people, which that didn't have to happen until we did this budget. So we had money for the reserves, but somehow it's being spent into, we hired somebody this year.
Oh, that wouldn't have accounted for the 10% reserve. That would have.
Well, I understand, but now we need to get our house in order. I feel like we're asking the DDA to bail us out.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Not
Okay,
at all.
well then, I stand corrected, but it sure feels that way.
Not at all. John?
What would be the upfront cost to secure bonds at $500,000 or $1 million?
Well, for $1 million, the estimated upfront costs were approximately $30,000.
Okay. So something less than that for $500,000 then?
Perhaps. Again, there's another project that's come up recently that may be asking for the DDA to go through a similar process, which would be yet another issue and yet another upfront cost. That's, you know, we have, as DDA, we have those considerations as well, not just the financial health of the entity, but its ability to carry out its mission downtown, which is of value to the city and to everybody. And, you know, I'd like to quickly make another point that the DDA board members are citizens of Woodland Park, and the city's budget and the city's financial health is more important to every one of them than the DDA's. So even though I stand here and I represent the DDA, I want you to know I've reviewed that draft budget. I've been to the work sessions. I care deeply about the financial health of the city, and it is a priority over that of the DDA. And I think we're all working toward the same goal. But in order to see the same path to it, we all need the same information. We need reports that are accurate, that are unbiased, so we can make the right decisions. I don't know that that's been provided. I think we're reading some different sheets of music, and we may need to work that out too. The DDA board has looked closely at this, and their decision was unanimous. Again, they're citizens putting the city's finances first.
Well, I didn't intend to make it sound like we're putting pressure. I think I alluded to the fact we don't want to put you in dire straits. And the finance director has already indicated that the city can still services everything that we're doing now. We're not in dire straits either. Granted, we have a much reduced fund balance, but we're still offering the same thing that we always have. So I just want to make sure, and kudos to you, Tanner, because for the first time, I can understand the budget better than I have in years. And I've had many discussions with your predecessor, if you will. And so great job. You're doing a great job. I just want to make sure, right, that we're examining every possible way. And when I hear what you all are saying, I kind of tend to agree. But I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can. No pressure. We're spending a lot of money doing some great things for our community. Let's not forget that. And DDA is going to be a big part as we move forward. So continue working together and try to investigate every possibility that we can. And I think it's clear all of us want what's best. And if that's not clear, let's make it clear right now. Okay?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate it. Really good job. Again, your analogy, you hit it out of the park.
Thanks. Go Cubs, huh?
And I want to reiterate that we will consider your proposal on the 17th of November under an action item, where we can actually do motions and accept, reject, discuss even further. So we are going to move forward
Yes, sir.
with this
Thank you.
proposal.
We are very committed to the most aggressive payment plan schedule we can justify.
I think for the first time, the DDA has foresight to see what's going to happen and to plan and to help this community grow in a good way. I really do. I pray that you succeed on every step of your plan in developing Woodland Station and bringing events into this community, increasing the tax revenue and paying the city off the loan that they have given to you. But you have not been given level ground in which to play on through the years. Now you have it. You citizens are really digging in, turning everything over, and doing a great job. I deeply appreciate everyone on the DDA board and every citizen in here participating in the council meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. Well said. Tanner, thank you again. And Mary Jo, I'm sorry.
I would like to say one thing, that we have all agreed, every member of the DDA board has agreed to aggressively pay this off as quickly as possible. Our goals for the next 14 years, which is the life of the DDA without extending it, is 14 years, and we want to be out of debt in 14 years, and that's why we are all sacrificing our time and energy as long as we can, doing as much as we can to put the money towards our debt rather than spending. And Woodland Station, what is planned for over there, follows our foundation plan. It follows our state statutes as what DDAs are for, and we, for the first time, are having an opportunity to step forward and actually put that into play. And you will see some great results. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Okay, I think we move on to the 510 fund. And welcome back, Mr. Farina.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yes, we'll move on to the Water Utility Fund first. That begins on page 49. And we'll follow the same approach as the last meeting where, in the case of the water and wastewater funds, I'll just kind of turn page by page and see if there are any questions on any of those pages, and then just progress through the pages. Also, Kip Wiley is here to answer any questions that you may have as we go page by page. So with that, I'll just get started on page 49. I just wanted to point out on this page that there is a $846,000 decrease in funds available. In other words, expenditures over revenues in this fund, and that's due to capital outlay in that fund of $1,326,000. That's the reason for that decrease, one-time expenditures on capital outlay. So fund balance will be drawn from about 2.6 million and ending projected at the end of 2017 at 1.7 million.
Refresh our memory, Kip, on the 1.3 million where we're spending it.
Three areas. We have planned a water line replacement on Dual, about 750 feet. That's about $120,000. We also have new requirements that were presented, we are mandated to meet from CDPHE, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. Those requirements are new disinfection requirements that they have established that is budgeted at $600,000. And then I also have a line item at $500,000 budgeted for the water augmentation reservoir.
Great, thank you. Excuse me, Mike, go ahead.
Okay. Any other questions on that first page, summary page? Okay, the second page, actually pages 50 and 51, these are summary pages of the revenue, so there's more detail behind these, so I'll just skip these pages and go to the detail, unless council would like to ask anything about them. But pages 50 and 51 are just summarization of revenues and expenses. So if you'd like, please turn to page 52, which is the first page of the detail revenue for the water fund. And are there any questions on this page?
Hey, Mike, going back to 51, the capital overlay for 1.39, are we going to have something like that in 2018?
Kip?
Probably not as much, but we intend to pay around $1 million for that reservoir in cash. So we have 500 budgeted for 17, and we'll have another 500 budgeted in 18.
So we'll be okay. Yeah.
We should.
Okay. So page 52, any questions? Page 53 is just a few more revenues. And then on page 54 starts the detail on the expenditure side. This is the water administration division of the budget for water. You'll note on this page the transfer for purchase services and insurance to the general fund.
No overtime?
For administration, we don't budget overtime. Basically, that's myself and our utilities technician. And to save costs, we just try to offer comp time.
Turning to page 55, any questions on this page?
Excuse
The
me, Mike.
water treatment operation?
Excuse me, can we go back to the page before? Salaries and wages, you're requesting about a 15% decrease in salaries. Tell us about that.
We had Barb Larson retire, and we hired a new staff at a lower pay rate.
Thank you.
Page 55.
Kip, why do we have the relationship with Westwood Lakes? What is that relationship?
We own 57% of the water rights at Westwood Lakes. The only thing is we purchase water from them, treated water. So we typically budget money in there to purchase that treated water. That treated water enters our system from basically over by the hospital. So we buy finished water from them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Page 56 is the water capital part of the budget. I think Kip mentioned some of those items already, the capital outlay. Any questions?
I would just like to make one note for everyone. In 2015, we did pay off a substantial amount of debt service.
When's the improvements at the water treatment plant? When will those be totally finished, do you think?
We had 1 year from a letter from CDPHE. We were supposed to receive that letter in May. They have delayed that, but we are anticipating those being done very soon, halfway through 2017, roughly.
Okay.
What's the status of the location of the proposed reservoir?
Status is we've met with the Boy Scouts a couple times, and we have then done a land appraisal of that. We're still waiting for those final numbers to see what the land is worth and what we were offering in exchange for that.
Any time expectations on that, or just curiosity?
I would like to be done with that by the end of the year.
This year.
Yes.
Christmas present.
Okay, turning to page 57, you have water rights and water field services. And lastly, for the Water Utility Enterprise Fund on page 58, you have water customer services. Any questions on this page?
Everyone's lips have stopped moving.
I'm sorry, I'm going to back up to previous topic with the reservoir. What's the expectations on additional capacity service?
In regards to how many more people we can serve,
Yeah.
or
That's a good measure, sure. Households, whatever.
none? It is just to preserve it's all augmentation water. It's the water that makes it legal for us to pump our local sources. So we already have the water available to us, but we have to bring it over via Colorado Springs pipeline and make water transactions. This brings that water here locally so we can withstand drought periods. So we can have, we don't have to rely on other entities for moving that water around.
Does that mean we will sever that other relationship, or just this is a safety?
No, this is just to have water on site. Right now, our current reservoir is about 55 acre feet. This new reservoir would be 350. And in a summer month, we'll turn our reservoir over in 1 month. So basically have 1 month of water in supply. The name of the game is water and storage locally. So we're trying to preserve our future so everything is, so we're self-sustaining. For example, the Homestake pipeline is very old. That could be shut down for a long period of time, and we can't last that long without that pipeline.
Thank you. I know you and I discussed all this before, but I just thought it'd be useful for other. Thank you.
So with the new reservoir, we have approximately 6, 8, 10 months?
At current water usage, this year we used about, or last year we used about 220 acre feet of augmentation water. If that thing is full at 350, that's a year's in
Year and a
supply.
half, maybe.
Mike, do we have this allocated as committed funds, restricted kind of, his 500 here, 500 there?
The utility funds are a little different than the general fund, but they do have, it's not really fund balance in
But
an
you've
enterprise
got a
fund.
pocket to put them in.
It's
I see.
more net position, but there are designations as well.
The GL designation, okay.
Okay, now to the wastewater fund, the home stretch of the draft budget. We got the same fund summary. You have an ending projected fund balance of $2.4 million, very little change to fund balance from 2016 to 2017. And then the next couple of pages, pages 60 and 61, they're summarizations of the revenue and expenditures. So I'll just have you flip to page 62, if that's all right. And page 62 begins the detail of the revenue for the wastewater fund.
I skipped ahead a little bit. How is the wastewater treatment plant project coming along?
It's come along fairly well. Currently, we're anticipating design approval from the state in the next couple weeks. Bid packages to go out November 18th, and then then select that contractor in December for construction in January.
When do you anticipate that being finished?
That'll take over about 16 months. It's a very integrated process. The plant has to still operate, and the timing of, or the sequencing of each process in the plant is critical.
Would it have been cheaper to build a new one?
No.
Like right next door, instead of just expanding this while it's operating? It just,
We thought
sometimes
about
it's easier to just to start fresh than it is to remodel something that's older.
The remodel is a challenge, but I think it's our best bang for our buck.
Okay, good.
The design is at 100%, you're saying in a couple of weeks?
The state will approve a design around 90% because they understand there's some tweaking that goes along with that. So the plans that have been submitted, I'm told, are at 90%.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, on page 62, you have the detailed revenues. Any question on that page?
I assume the 8 million is the bond, the bond actuary.
The bond was at 8.3.
Yeah. So we didn't take it all, or what happened?
No, the numbers came in. We didn't get everything we had asked for. You're in a pool with other entities, and the funds kind of shift a little bit.
Okay. Page 63, wastewater administration. Any questions on this page? Also here, this is where the transfer is to the general fund for purchase services and insurance.
This is also identified by a number fund, right? Wastewater administration.
I'm sorry.
Is that a fund? That's a separate fund?
It's
number?
part of the wastewater fund. It's a division within the wastewater fund, Fund 520.
520.
Page 63.
It's not a 525 or something?
No, it's 520. It's different with the second set of digits as part of a division of the whole fund or department of the whole fund. Turning to page 64, wastewater treatment operation.
At the bottom of the page, Kip, for travel and training, quite an increase from the year before. Just school's more expensive?
No. Our operators renew their certifications, and it doesn't come up every year.
Okay.
So we adjust that when they need their training.
Page 65, capital, wastewater capital, including debt service. You see new loan payments on the 2016 loan.
I'd just like to point out here too, since you guys are looking at the new payments in 16 and then also in 17, about 451,000 in additional debt service.
Okay. Page 66, the wastewater field services.
So Kip, just quick, these are the guys that go out and fix the pipes?
Yep, this is our collection distribution crew.
Okay. And how many do we have working? 2?
Pardon me?
2? Do we have 2 employees there?
in field services, currently have 4,
4.
and we're bringing on a 5th, starting in December.
And it's shared between 510 and 520.
Yes. So.
Oh, it is. Okay, so I'm looking at these salaries going, we need to pay these people more.
Field services, myself, staff that works in both water and wastewater, it's a split funding. So we spend more time in water. 65% of our salaries or expenses are funded from the 510 fund, and the other 35% are funded from the 520 fund.
Okay.
Okay, and last page, page 67, customer services. Okay, that wraps up the presentation of the entire draft from October 12th. Are there any other questions on this budget? Draft.
I have to congratulate you on the detail. The last few budgets, we really had to guess on where the expenditures were, and the detail here is great. I remember getting on council and we talked about $20,000, and I said, well, what are we spending that on? And I was told what we were spending it on, and then I was told that I voted on it. So this is nice where I know what I'm actually voting on. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, without any further questions on this budget, I'd like to turn to the supplemental appropriation for 2016.
And where is that?
It was emailed to each of you 2 days ago. Or we can make copies if.
I would like one, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Yes.
While she's making those, Mike, why don't you talk about supplemental appropriations, what that process is, what it accomplishes, and so on. We can do that without the numbers.
And just 1 second before you go there, Mike, if you would. Kip, I think I say this every year, or the 3 or 4 years I've been sitting here, but obviously we're all envious of your fund balance and how you do business, and keeping us at the state-of-the-art level and everything that we do, and just very secure in our water. With a lot of money in the bank, I don't know how you could do a better job. I'm sure the city manager's got some ways that you can do a better job, but from my eyes, job well done.
I appreciate that, but most of it goes to the staff. They save money. They're the eyes and the ears on the ground. They know what's out there, and they do it all. And fortunately, we've had some tap revenue lately where we haven't in the past. So
These things have a way of starting at the top, so nice job.
Okay, I can definitely start off by saying that the supplemental appropriation is also in draft form. So as we continue to refine the budget, continue to refine our year-end projections, there may be some changes. Probably not as much, because the changes we're making now or the year-end projections we're making now are smaller dollar, and really this supplemental appropriation is more for the higher dollar revisions that we are proposing to the budget for 2016. The packet that you're getting, the first page, summarizes the supplemental appropriation, and it summarizes it by fund, and it basically reflects how the ordinance that we'll be adopting, how the supplemental appropriation will be. Now, what goes into this supplemental appropriation are changes that have already been considered throughout the year on specific projects primarily. So this budget or this supplemental appropriation is recognizing those expenditures and budgeting for them for legal purposes. The budget is the supplemental or the appropriation is the legal ability to spend the funds that the city has. So this is appropriating those funds that we have. And also, the other thing it's accomplishing is transfers from one fund to the other. They're not really expenditures, they are transfers that do need to be appropriated or budgeted. So, like I was saying, on page 1 of the supplemental appropriation, that's a summary of the increase increases in revenues by fund, and also the supplemental appropriation or the increase in the expenditure level by fund as well. This is what you would see on the ordinance. There are proposed supplemental appropriations for the general fund, the grants fund, the drainage debt service fund, the Memorial Park debt service fund, the Aquatic Center debt service fund, the Streets Capital Improvement Projects Fund, the Water Utility, and the Wastewater Utility funds. Then if you turn to the next 4 pages are a lot of detail, so I'll try to capture that in a concise way to still hit the highlights that are in the supplemental appropriation, but not get too detailed unless, of course, council would like to hear more about it. So the first page, or page 2 of this, is the detail of the supplemental appropriation for the general fund. Okay, I'll explain how the detail format is, or how it's formatted. So each fund that's in the supplemental appropriation detail, it starts out with revisions first to the budgeted revenues and expenditures. So you start out with an original amount adopted back when the original 2016 budget was adopted, and then it details the supplemental appropriation by fund or by revenue or by expenditures in that second column that's labeled 2016 appropriation, supplemental appropriation. Column 1 is just a description of the lines that are affected. Column 2 is the supplemental appropriation detail for that line item. And column 3 summarizes the revenue and expenditure revisions. So you have your beginning adopted budget plus the total revenue supplemental appropriation or increase in budgeted revenues, and then the supplemental appropriation on the expenditure side. Following the revenue and expenditure revisions is a summary of the resulting analysis of the projected ending fund balance. So I'm going to highlight each of the changes without going through each line in detail, but again, be here to answer any questions about them. So the largest component of this supplemental appropriation is related to the 3 large capital projects, the Aquatic Center, the Memorial Park improvements, and the fleet facility. It crosses several funds as revenues and expenditures, transfers, and transfers in and transfers out in the general fund, the Streets Capital Improvements Fund, and the 510 and 520 utility funds. In the general fund, there's a supplemental appropriation for the Memorial Park expenditures, about $1.8 million. That's just to recognize that that's the amount that is projected to be spent in 2016 on that project. On the revenue side related to the Memorial Park, there's an increase in revenues for donations, $14.4 million. Transfer in from the grants fund, totaling $390,000. And transfers in and out of the Water, Wastewater, and Streets Capital Improvements Fund, transferring into the general fund and transferring out of the utility funds and the Streets Capital Improvement Fund. At the work session, you may remember, we went over all those sources and uses, and this is just appropriating them and budgeting them for the 2016 budget. In the Aquatic Center, we're budgeting for expenditures $3,786,000 for 2016 expenditures. Again, remember there's also a budget because this is a 2-year project overlapping into 2017. And the other side of the equation for the Aquatic Center are the revenues, the donations. There's recognizing the increase in revenue for donations, $293,000, and also the transfers from the Water, Wastewater, and Streets Capital Improvements Fund, totaling $541,000. On the Fleets Facilities project, the majority of this project was completed in 2015, so there's a small amount in 2016, but we're not, that can be covered by other line items that are pluses and minuses and absorbed, so it's a very small amount, so there's really no supplemental appropriation for the fleet project because most of it was done in 2015. However, we do need to recognize the transfers in the general fund from the grants fund of $74,700 and the transfers in from the Water, Wastewater, and Streets Capital Improvements Fund totaling $999,500. Again, just to remind you, those transfers all were presented as sources at the last meeting. No?
Looking looking at the Keep Woodland Park Beautiful $20,000 Lowe's impact grant. Does that normally go into the general, or should that go into the grants fund?
Grants fund is a special revenue fund. It can account for grants, certainly. However, sometimes or a lot of times, it doesn't need to be used as a special fund. The grants can be accounted for in the general fund as well. But it's best practice to not create multitude of funds in accounting. So this grant is small enough, it's short enough in duration that it can be accounted for in the general fund.
Okay. And do we consider that restricted?
That's restricted. But it'll all be spent this year, so it has to be used for the purpose that it was given, and it has to be used by December 1st in this case.
Good. Just want to clarify that.
Thank you. So that's the majority or the largest component of this supplemental appropriation are for those three projects, recognizing the expenditures and also recognizing the transfers in and out of the funds and the donations that were received and the grants that were received. Moving on, there's also in the general fund transfers from the general fund to the COP debt service fund. The COPs were for the Memorial Park project. That's a transfer out of $17,400 out of the general fund into the Memorial Park debt service fund. And also the same for the Aquatic Center debt service fund. There's a transfer out of the general fund, $166,200, and into the Aquatic Center debt service fund. These are to cover the negative fund balances that were at the end of 2015. So the money was in the general fund at the end of 2015. Now we need to make those fund balances in those debt service funds positive, and that's what these transfers are doing in 2016. Next, I was going to point out the Lowe's Community Impact Grant, recognizing $20,000 in revenue from Lowe's for Keep Woodland Park Beautiful, and opposite side expenditure to spend that money of $20,000. This supplemental appropriation in the general fund also includes increases in expenditures for unanticipated and underestimated expenditures. For example, vehicle and other equipment repairs equaling $89,100. However, that is also offset with a recognizing revenue received from insurance proceeds, $21,300.
Mike, can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
I'm looking at our draft, and then I'm looking at the supplemental, and I'm just trying to figure out where the numbers lie here and here. If I figured out the numbers, it looks like we have our projected revenue is almost $80,000 more.
The draft are the projections overall. Right now, I'm just hitting the highlights and the major items in the supplemental. Normally, that's how it's done.
I'm hoping this is a good thing. That's what I'm getting at.
It's giving us the ability so that way, when at the end, when the audit is complete, that we've budgeted for all the expenditures that we're going to do. Otherwise, we violated the law. We've overspent our budget, but this is the chance to appropriate what we're spending. So it's not going to equal exactly, because a lot of the items throughout the budget are some are more, some are less, and they kind of wash each other out. But these are the major items that, if we don't budget, then we'll exceed our budget.
No, I understand it's a budget. It's not an exact number. I'm just seeing the numbers go up on certain things, and I'm hoping, like, total revised revenue budget, $10,700 or $10,730,000, and then I'm seeing here what we were projected. It's gone up, so I'm hoping that's a good thing, or I'm missing something after all this other stuff. We're losing money other places, so it's just a wash. Or you'll get to that.
I think so. If not, if I don't understand your question, maybe I can follow up with you later.
Where's this line match with this line here?
In most cases, they are very close to the same, or, okay, I think I know. The draft you have is October 12th.
Correct.
When I compare this to the budget draft as I have it now, that's not before you, they're very close.
They are, okay. I'm hoping for positive news here, that at the end of the year we have more in our unrestricted and also in our 10% that we need.
Okay. So then there's also an increase for legal services, 76,000, and also an increase for the health reimbursement account amounts to 10,000, and those were just underestimated at the time the 2016 budget was prepared. Also, police overtime is another one where it was underestimated overtime. So that is budgeted at supplemental appropriation for 75,000. Okay, so that pretty much outlines the budgeted increased revenues and the increase in expenditures of supplemental appropriation for the general fund. So that brings me to the summary, the fund balance summary for the general fund projected at the end of 2016, as opposed to what we've been talking about 2017. This is projected ending 2016 with the original budget plus the budgeted increased revenues, less the expenditure revision, and where we would be at the end of 2016 if we met our budget exactly as budgeted. In the case of revenues, hopefully we'll be higher at year end. In the case of expenditures, we'll be lower. But this is a picture of the projected. So that at the bottom of the page, you see entitled Fund Balance Summary. So we started out audited beginning fund balance January 1st, 2016 of $12,440,418. With this supplemental appropriation, expenditures exceed revenues by about $3.9 million, resulting in an ending fund balance December 31st, 2016 of about $8.5 million. Okay? The next part of that summary is the budgeted ending fund balance designations. Part of that $8.5 million is non-spendable because it's due from the DDA, $1,035,058. There's also a non-spendable component for supplies inventory. That number's the same because at the end of we won't know what that number actually is until year end when we go through our audit and we do inventory. But it's not going to change too much and not really affect the presentation here. That's $136,788. That's the number that came from the 2015 audit. Then there's the amounts that are restricted for emergencies, otherwise known as the TABOR 3% emergency reserve. That is $280,000. Then the restricted for capital project, because the Memorial Park is slated to be finished this year. And that is, so the amount there, the $5,339,918 is the amount of the debt proceeds that are projected to be left at the end of 2016, and therefore they're restricted for that project because they're debt proceeds. That leaves an unrestricted, unassigned fund balance of $1.7 million projected at the end of 2016.
So let's say the DDA pays off the $1 million loan. The fund balance doesn't change. That just moves from non-spendable to unrestricted.
That's correct.
Okay. Why is it $1,035,000? I thought it was $1 million. Is there a reason? I didn't understand the $35,000 added on.
In 2014, the abatements that Tanner spoke to earlier were excessive, and in order to balance, and they were unexpected, and so the city covered that shortfall in the DDA's budget by the $35,058, with the understanding that it would be paid back at some point in the future. So we just added it to the $1 million just for accounting.
Didn't we pay $36,000?
36 was separate. 36 was the 3 years of interest, and that payment has occurred.
Okay, thank you. So really, it's just more. We'll have more cash on hand
at the end of 2016. Right. But then we carry that forward into 2017, where that number is smaller. The unrestricted unassigned is in the 2017 budget was around $80-some thousand.
So it went from 110 to 90, now 80?
Well, 2016 is just a little different because there's still money to be spent in 2017 for the aquatic center, so it does show that the unrestricted unassigned is actually 1.7 million, which is it's a good number to have. But realizing that we're going to still continue to spend that in 2017. Okay. Any other questions? That's the general fund. If there's any other questions, I'll try to answer them. If not, we can move on to page 3.
I did have one question, and when will we vote on the supplemental appropriation? Will that be in December as well?
Check the schedule.
Yeah, the calendar is December.
Correct.
Since our last meeting, have we asked for any value engineering on the aquatic center for savings?
Yes and no. We did have an update meeting. We walked around the project with the superintendent, the project manager, the architect, and the project engineer, and our team. And we reemphasized the importance of cost savings. I sent an email to the council earlier that said that if there were cost savings, those would be to the city. There is no cost sharing associated with that. They continuously look for opportunities for cost savings. And we've gone through a very significant value engineering process already. So they are always on the lookout for opportunities to save us money.
Thank you.
Okay. So then moving on to page 3. A lot of this is just repetition. I tried to cover it as I was going through the general fund because it's transfers from these funds to the general fund. So the grants fund, the only thing different on here, you see the transfer out of the grants fund to the general fund, but then there's also the revenue flowing into the grants fund that is going to be transferred to the general fund. So those two amounts are equal, but we need to recognize that. The drainage debt service fund, revenues are projected right now they're projected to come in higher than what was originally budgeted. So we're budgeting them. I think at this point they're even higher than what's in this when this was prepared at the time. And then since this debt is paid off in 2017, there's going to be an ending surplus in that fund. We wanted to budget that and return it to the Streets Capital Improvements Projects Fund in 2016, leaving the ending projected fund balance for 2017 close to zero. Is $39,000 the right amount? That's just based on the projections, but I think it's even going to be more than that. The Memorial Park Debt Service Fund, I already touched on that. That's the transfer in to cover the negative fund balance. Flipping the page to page 4. The same thing in the Aquatic Center Debt Service Fund. There's a transfer in from the general fund to cover the negative fund balance at the end of 2015. And then in the Streets Capital Improvement Projects Fund, there's that transfer in from the Drainage Debt Service Fund that I've talked about. The transfers to the general fund for the 3 projects. And then there's also some project savings that we're recognizing as savings on the expenditure side, drainage improvements and equipment. And then also accounted for when the budget was done in 2016 originally, the Aquatic Center was part of the project was actually budgeted right into this fund. We moved and I wanted to account for all of the project in the general fund and then cover that with transfers out of the fund that it was originally budgeted in. So we're reducing that expenditure line, but we're adding the transfer out to the general fund.
Mike, I didn't even realize this, but Memorial Park Debt Service Fund, that'll go away when Memorial Park is complete?
No, that will be in existence until the COPs or the certificates of participation are paid off.
Okay.
which I'm not sure of the maturity date. I believe it's 20, well, I don't want to guess, but that'll exist until the debt's paid off.
And this is new since we started doing
Correct.
them. Okay. And then obviously the aquatic center, and there's no fleet maintenance because that's done. Or is there's a fleet maintenance fund? Or is that part of just,
I'm sorry, the
well,
question.
why isn't Memorial Park Debt Service Fund part of Parks and Rec Fund, or that's out of the general now that I think about it?
Correct.
Okay.
And there was no debt service associated with the fleet maintenance facility.
Thank you.
Okay. So, flipping to page 5. You have the water utility fund and the wastewater utility fund. Again, a lot of this was already covered with the transfers to and from the general fund and the utility funds. The only other thing that's different is when the 2016 budget was prepared, the aquatic center was accounted for, some of the budget was accounted for in these funds. Again, we moved all of the capital expenditures to the general fund just to account for it as a whole instead of in pieces, but then pay for it, or the sources are being transferred out of these two funds into the general fund. Any questions? All right, well, that concludes the 2016 supplemental appropriation presentation. I'll still stand for any questions. Any further questions? Also, I would like to thank Tanner for coming up and explaining the DDA budget, and also Kip for being able to help out with the questions for the utility funds.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for the detail. It really is, as Noel indicated, very helpful for all of us. Thank you very much. Questions, council? We are in public comment. If anybody would, Mr. Good, if you'd like to come forward.
Can I?
Oh, you can. I'm
Can I
sorry.
talk
didn't
about
see-
the
Sorry, Jerry, we'll come back to you.
thing from last time?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Good, no, go ahead, you're fine.
Thank you.
Yeah. I presented some things to my fellow council in the city, and I'm interested in the budget process and the fund balances. We're talking about 2017, 2016, looks like it's pretty good shape. So I have a bunch of stuff I composed, and what I do is I write things on paper so I don't forget what I was going to talk about. So I'm going to read from my papers, if you don't mind. First, the real question is this city council actually interested in being proactive to reduce and optimize hard-earned citizen tax dollars spent for the benefit of its majority of citizens? I assume that answer is a universally yes, but proof is always in actions and not words. I believe we need to adjust our spending actions and frugality course. Of course, remember that my perspective comes from my successful businesses that were built on the experience of private sector survival, where you don't have an unlimited supply of citizens' tax money available to avoid going out of business. That's mostly a national perspective, obviously. Some city representatives' backgrounds are mostly built on public sector or government accountability without those pressures or experience, so mine's a little different. I've come up with some cost-saving discussion ideas to discuss amongst the council in future meetings. I will briefly list. Others on council will likely have many other additional ideas on frugality we can discuss amongst ourselves going forward. Number one, total city burden salary costs are very costly at $5.7 million. We could cut salaries 10% for a savings of $570,000 across multiple funds, or a 5% cut saves $285,000. I think many of the salaries over $50,000 are an area worthy of specific temporary reduction consideration. 6 department supervisors are each paid $80,000 to over $90,000 base salary, which amounts to a cost to the city of $96,000 to $112,000 each burden. There are other senior city employees with comparable salaries approaching these compensation levels. Most are not universally accepted critical safety position dollars. My feeling is that in a city where highly educated and highly qualified teachers are paid half of those salaries, we may be using citizen tax monies where they may feel there are other higher priorities recognizing that the city's business is not with teachers, such as teachers and safety personnel like fire, EMT, and police personnel. Needless to say, for council to consider the proposed employee pay raise, I consider personally irresponsible while we leave insufficient emergency reserve for the safety of our citizens in our 2017 budget. Number two, these are ideas once again. Number two, get rid of an extravagant and council unfunded special projects department which functionally duplicates much of the volunteer force efforts in Woodland Park already. Organizations such as the DDA events volunteers, the WPAA member organizations, MAC organizations, and the Chamber of Commerce already have many volunteers doing much of the same things. This new department was not funded specifically by the City Council when they affirmed the 2016 budget, which means it's been operating without council approval. My opinion is that these functions are mostly overlapping other entities covering these functions, and in a budget crunch, adding this department going forward in 2017 is unwarranted. The 2017 budget request for the surplus department is $282,700. Now, $93,000 of that are Main Street costs, which may be retained. Number three, another idea. The city has 57 vehicles available for 84 full-time employees. Public safety priority vehicles include 17 police vehicles for on-duty usage. That leaves 40 vehicles for 67 non-emergency personnel. Emergency public safety is normally defined as police, fire, ambulance, people like that for a small town. A water or sewer line break is not a life and death circumstance. 8 vehicles are dedicated to City Hall personnel, 8 vehicles are dedicated to Parks and Rec, 7 are dedicated to the Water Department, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Certainly some vehicles, none of which are required to carry emergency equipment, are needed for transit to out-of-work sites within Woodland Park on occasion. That means I count 43 of the remaining 67 city staff who are office-bound staff in one location or another. That leaves 24 mobile personnel for 40 vehicles. That leaves 16 vehicles excess, even if one considers all being used at once without sharing or motor pooling considerations. 17% of the workforce has dedicated vehicles personally assigned to them. Some of those vehicles are for transit between home and work, even though private sector folks are required to provide their own transit to and fro work. I assume the citizens of Woodland Park consider that all workers be treated similarly in transit terms. In examining who has what dedicated vehicles, there are very few who have a non-hyped emergency public safety explanation. Since it takes 10 minutes maximum to get from one end of Woodland Park to the other, why supply vehicles just to get to a work vehicle based nearby? Reasoning includes emergency reasons to save time. I ask, why not have the employee use their own vehicle to get to work just like 99% of the rest of the world and reimburse them for actual work-related non-commute transit in their own vehicle? One condition of employment could be you have to have a way to get to work, which is normal for the rest of the world outside of this government. If on official business, just slap an inexpensive magnetic door sign, Spence will make those by the dozens, on what is carried in the vehicle storage otherwise. One situation mileage reimbursement creates is to have employees thusly affected having to file a federal tax form 2106 for employee business expenses. Every school teacher out there has to do this each year, and they get paid much less, and they consider it no big deal. Savings, if you sold 10 of the excess 16 vehicles, you probably net maybe $100,000 plus less maintenance and repairs and gas costs that way offset any mileage reimbursement costs. I know of a dented 12-year-old Subaru with 110,000 miles that recently sold locally for $8,000, so an average sale per vehicle should be at least that much for candidate vehicles of the city. Number 4, Woodland Park has been told there's zero possible savings to be had in examining the Aquatic Center from what is called a peer review expert. I disagree. I've contacted more than one of these types of experts, and they say that is untrue, even knowing the state of the construction as of this week. It would be wise to consider having one of these peer review expert firms come in and do value engineering analysis. Of course, that would require full cooperation and no interference from the city or its contractors. I've been told this takes at most a day on site and probably less than a $5,000 fee. I also have relatives who do this for a living, who would do it for much less, but I don't recommend this approach for obvious reasons, although I would trust their recommendations for experts to consider more than vested personnel from the current people involved, including A&P and the city staff. That just makes sense to have independency. I've been told specifics of areas to examine and research that may hold savings of $50,000 to $1 million, depending on vested cooperation and the state of design material orders. It seems a small investment for a potential savings of much more. It seems hard to argue this as being a useless pursuit as long as it's done ASAP and existing principles do not thwart useful dialogue and ideas. This is commonly done by construction managers I know well and without resentment, as they normally order this as a normal course of business, as those people love savings in their projects. We are not building an aquatic park with gold fixtures. The current cost of $479 per square foot is higher than hospitals with sophisticated operating rooms and enormous costly FF&E, which are built less than $360 per square foot in much more hostile environments than ours. Comparable or better aquatic centers, not pole barns with a pool, has been disparagingly dismissed as my comparison, and full-service rec centers are built for $260 per square foot in those same hostile environments elsewhere. What is being built is not just a pool, despite the citizens' impression, but it is also not the Taj Mahal. Apparently, Woodland Park is the most expensive location in the world to build with the most strenuous design standards existing on the planet. That's preposterous and should be audited by experts in a different subject. A peer review with a cooperative staff is suggested to save many thousands of dollars and more in value engineering pursuits. Other add-on subjects for the budget that I would like to throw to the council for consideration and discussion to the budget that make sense to me include a council-controlled fund for independent contractor expertise beyond what the city provides, or instead of what the city employs, hired directly by council representatives and accountable only to council. These experts may include IT specialists, attorneys, construction managers, efficiency experts, accounting consultants, etc. I suggest that $20,000 restricted funds for such purposes be considered by council. Number 2, buy the remainder of Cassell financial accounting modules to streamline the finance department. We already have much of their package for certain functions. The condition of the books is poor, but not the fault of this director. Much of the absurd double journal entry problem is due to having 2 different financial systems that do not flow together for information. Thus, extra crossover journal entries must be made manually, which is one huge reason some books are temporarily being done in spreadsheets. To flow to one system package will save many thousands of dollars going forward in time and make legitimate accounting reporting a prompt prospect instead of the current disaster. Our current treasurer concurs that one system, which is Cassell, with a good experience with it, would be a huge benefit to the city's financial operations. He, however, doesn't want to push it in the budget, but I'm going to. The cost is probably around $50,000 to $60,000 for the remaining critical modules that we need to migrate from our second ADG software system. Number 3, in the last little bit, is if possible, train a current finance department employee to be the backup accountant functionally, or hire an actual accountant to have a second person who can do final entries, trial balance certifications, reporting, etc. Cost savings and financial audit responsibility would improve dramatically. Those are my suggestions for consideration and for discussion at a later time with the council. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Val. Any comments before we move to public comment from council? Okay, I'm sorry. Paul?
No, just like to thank Val for putting this sheet together.
Mr. Good, would you like to come forward, sir?
Jerry Good, 1005 Sun Valley Drive. I'm terrible at public speaking, but I was inspired today. I feel very privileged, and I think the rest of the citizens of Woodland Park should be honored to have someone like Tanner Coy representing the majority of the citizens here. He's done an outstanding job. I think we should write him in for President of the United States. And Noel, thank you very much for your comments tonight. You really, I think, hit it on the head a lot, and I'm appreciative of being involved with people of that quality, and that's all I got.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry. Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll move on to public comment on items not on the agenda, and we have Ken Hartsfield.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. I'm here on behalf of Ken Hartsfield, 1151 Sundance Circle, Woodland Park. I'm here on behalf of Habitat for Humanity and our Clock Tower condominium project. In particular, we've had some discussion tonight about sewer and water, and I'm going to continue that a little bit on a more specific basis. There was ordinance effective as of at least 2002, maybe before that, which is requiring conversion projects from residential apartments to condominiums to have individual water piping and sewer piping to each unit of the building. That would, in our case, require 10 separate sewer lines and 10 separate water lines out to this city sewer connection. I've done other condominium projects in other jurisdictions, and this hasn't been the case, and I did some quick study of what was required in some other jurisdictions, and a single water line and sewer line is acceptable and then distributed among the various condominiums and that. This is not required for apartments in Woodland Park, but I was looking to see examples of condominiums in Woodland Park, and quite honestly, I couldn't find very many examples of a condominium versus a townhouse. In a townhouse, having separate sewer and water lines from the street makes reasonable sense in my mind. One example I did find in Woodland Park was the Paradise condominiums on Paradise Circle, 800, thereabouts. There's was a conversion of 5 buildings, which have 8 units each, 4 upstairs, 4 downstairs, and that was converted in 2006. So this ordinance was in place at the time those were converted, and they don't have 8 sewer lines going out. I don't know if they have one from each building, but there was no new infrastructure put in place. And as far as billing, I checked with both the management and city utilities, and there's a single bill sent to that condominium project. So they're not individually metered as far as the city's concerned. And speaking to the management, the water rates are just prorated based on the number of units. So in the building code, there's no separation between privately owned condominiums versus apartments, just multifamily housing. And in our case, I'd like to at least explore a possibility of relief from the city to use a single water tap, and particularly a single sewer line exiting the property. The existing infrastructure of the building will support the fixture counts and water demand and sewer demand of that building currently. We'd have to do additional tap for fire sprinklers. But I didn't know if there was any possibility of relief, especially with the precedence of the project in 2006 on the Paradise condos.
Thanks, Ken. Kim, can you speak to that for us?
I can a little bit. I haven't been shared information on how many fixture units they're looking at for converting the loft house, which is was a hotel, into 9 dwelling units. So I don't know the fixture counts that they're proposing. I know they have an 1.5 inch tap currently. If that 1.5 inch tap will serve the 9 units, it may not. I don't know that. But our code does say, let's see if I can read it for you here. In the utility code, section 1336040, says each dwelling unit and each lot, tract, or parcel of land shall be served with its own separate sewer service line connected separately to the public sewer main. I think the reason behind this was if a sewer line backed up and it was shared, it's difficult to predict who backed it up, and the damage done to whatever unit on there isn't really fair to the other property owners or the person that is in. So that's why I think our code says that. As far as a water shutoff, there, Mr. Hartsfield pointed out some circumstances. Our code also spells out condominiums as a residential construction. Residential construction has one sewer line and one water service line. The one water service line is so that we can control water connection to that unit. So if they don't pay their bill, it can be shut off, other reasons. So that's why I have stood by one service line for each unit for our code.
Excuse me. There's a meter, separate meter for each unit, correct? And that's the reasoning, I'm guessing. That's part of the reasoning anyway.
There's a couple different ways you can do it. For example, Trail Ridge Apartments, that's one tap, one sewer tap, one water tap. I think they sub-meter inside the building to each unit. I don't know that for sure, but we send out one bill with the number of units on there. Similar to Paradise Circle condominiums, it's one bill spread out against 40 units. So there's 40. So let me break it down real quick. A utility bill is broken into maintenance cost and a capital cost, and that's per unit. Okay, so when you have multiple units, the water total for the building with multiple units is divided into how many units there are. It's an cheap, easy way to do it. It's effective, but when it comes to individually owned units, we don't do it that way. Our code just has us do it individual service lines.
I imagine now in the Paradise condos, which were the Paradise Apartments, they were grandfathered in.
Well, we're in a similar situation where we're applying a code from 2002 or before, and we're being asked to meet that code criteria. The Paradise condos were developed or transferred in 2006 after the same code was in place. There has been no change to that code as far as amendments or new ordinances since that time.
Ken, how soon would a decision have to be made on how to approach this? What point?
Ideally, I'd like to walk out with an answer tonight, but I know that's probably not feasible at all. I'm not sure what the process is to request this kind of relief.
Well, you haven't even applied yet, right? You don't know what the real number is yet.
As far as what, sir?
As far as the 9 individual line, what the tap fees are going to cost you.
Well, we've got 9 units, and the current tap, and plus a house meter would be 10 taps total, and they're currently 13,400, I believe, for the Tier 1 residential. So potentially $134,000. There is some relief for credit for the existing tap, which is some $50,000. So there's a $65,000 fee associated with paying for all those new taps. And there's also the infrastructure cost, and so that's part of what I'm also addressing. It will require replumbing a lot of the interior work inside the building, as well as installation of new sewer lines and water lines to service the building. As condominiums, there will be a homeowners association, so there is an entity which will be partial ownership of all the condominium owners, but they would be responsible for that sewer line maintenance and water lines coming in and out of the building. And since these are true condominiums and not townhomes, where we have units above and below, the typical arrangement on the condominium is the responsibility for the homeowner is until it enters the wall. At that point, it becomes the homeowners association responsibility as it goes into the crawl space and out of the building to the city main.
If if they did develop or put together an HOA, would that make sense, so they could get one bill with one meter? Does that make any sense at all?
I haven't had any experience with those. Obviously, we have an exception here. I don't know how that occurred, but, this is uncommon ground, so I don't have an answer for you, I'm sorry.
How do you think we should move forward, David?
I think we need a chance to look at it.
Certainly.
I knew that you were coming tonight, Ken, but I knew some of the subject matter, but we've not had a chance to
You and
discuss it.
I spoke briefly with Kit, but
Yeah.
be glad to.
I don't know the history behind 2006. I was the Public Works Director then. We'd have to do our research to see why that decision was made then. This sounds very similar. We worked very closely with Habitat to try to bring this project to fruition. Understand the concerns, though, have to do with metering and with problems that might occur in a shared sewer line and the impact it could have on other entities. So while it's easy to make a decision to look at the economy now, saving that money, we would be projecting a problem in the future for the residents, perhaps, if there were an issue. That's what we need to consider. That's what we need to look at. We want to do the best thing for Habitat, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure we do the right thing for the 9 families that are residing there as well in individual ownership situations. So allow us to please take a look at that.
Sounds like a great suggestion. Thanks for bringing this forward, Ken.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time.
You bet. Thanks very much. And great project. We all know that. Reiterate what you all are doing is tremendous. Thank you very much. Okay, move on. Unless there's anyone else. I don't have anyone else signed up. Would anyone else like to speak at this time? Okay, mayor's reports. I have a couple of events. Friday, November 11th, 9:30 to 10:45. Woodland Park School District cordially invites you to the Veterans Day Assembly in the Woodland Park High School Gymnasium. If there's inclement weather, it's going to be backed up to the 18th. This event was canceled last year because of weather. It is a great event. I remember 2 years ago the high school gymnasium being absolutely full with students and dignitaries and everybody, and a great time for all of us to honor our veterans. And I would highly recommend that everybody comes and shows their appreciation. It's just one of the great events that we do in our community every year. Tuesday, November 15th at 5:30, the Chamber Business After Hours. This time will be at People's Bank. Thursday, November 17th from 8:30 until 10, the Chamber sponsored event, Overtime Rule Changes, Are You Ready? At the UPass Cultural Center. Call 687-9885 for more information. And the last thing, obviously everybody has the opportunity to cast their ballot this coming Tuesday. A lot of us already have. So one thing that we all should take advantage of living in this great country, and I'll move forward. Mayor Pro Tem Harvey, what do you have for us?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay.
Nothing
Mr.
further.
Carr,
Thank you.
Nothing further.
Just a big thank you.
Thank you.
I have nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Nothing.
That's it. Okay, we'll move on. And City Attorney?
I have nothing, Your Honor.
Very quiet this evening. David?
A couple of things, Mayor. Dan, why don't you give us an update on the 2 projects, please?
The park is moving along. This week we started slowly filling the ponds. Playground structures are now permanently installed, so those won't be moving anytime soon. And the bathroom retrofits as far as wall fixtures, toilets, sinks, furnaces, just fitting those out is currently underway as well. Aquatic Center moving along quite nicely. Exterior wall foundations are now 100%. The masons are on site currently installing blocks, so that way they can continue with damp proofing and waterproofing of the foundation. And within the next week or so, they'll have masons mobilized on site to start putting in block and going vertical. So heading in the right direction.
That's exciting. Say, when can we play basketball? Is that close? The rim's up, or is everything?
Oh, right next door?
Yeah.
We currently actually installed fencing around it this week, so I would assume sooner than later, basketball hoops would be up, so you can definitely hit the court sooner than later.
Great, thanks, Dan. Sure. That's exciting stuff.
A quick question. With the weather we've had, as the aquatic project, has it moved faster than they anticipated this time of year?
They are capitalizing on every good day that they can get in their, presence. So we are currently on schedule where the master schedule was originally when the project started.
Thanks, Dan. Suzanne?
Thank you, David. Council, you may notice in the back there that Jessica has some company in the videography booth. That I'd like to introduce. This is Kat Megan, and she is volunteering with the city. She's a Cares Bible student, and she's taking courses and classes on government, and so she's working with the city clerk's office 2 hours a week, and we have her doing different things like scanning, updating the code books, the ones of you that need your code books updated. She's updating the CRS statutes and all different projects like that. So I'd like you just to meet Kat.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. That's all from the staff tonight, Mayor.
Great, thank you very much. Tanner, we heard a little bit from you tonight. Do you have anything further?
No, Your Honor. Mr. Mayor. Our mayor. Sorry, tired, long day.
Yeah, all of
I gotta
us.
go light Christmas trees after this.
Okay, we'll have fun. Thanks again for a great presentation and report tonight. Very much appreciated. Okay, looks like a lot of tired folks, so this meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.